Hey everybody, so this is going to be my quick spoiler-free review of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, which is currently still out in theaters. I, I went and saw it opening weekend with several people in my own D&D group, and I wanted to give some quick thoughts and reviews, which at this time are no longer hot takes or anything like that because there's lots of discussion already out there. But maybe, particularly if you aren't in the tabletop gaming community, it's only just now kind of coming onto your radar as something that you might want to go see. It did sort of come out of nowhere. So this is going to be a quick spoiler review, spoiler-free review, and then later I want to do a spoiler review as well, with a discussion of some themes that I really enjoyed from it and some specific things that I really didn't enjoy from it. Just kind of give that perspective. But the quick view that I want to give down first, this is a D&D movie, so I'm going to take a page out of Matt Colville's book and give you the gameable information up front. And the gameable information up front is this movie is great. It's phenomenal. I loved it. It's so good, and people have been so surprised and liked it so much. It's beginning to hit that backlash phase where now you've got the people who think it's going to be cool to hate on it. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to put this video out, just so that you could maybe get my view on that as the backlash is starting to ramp up. But it was critics were loving it and audiences were loving it on Rotten Tomatoes. I think you're going to now start to have the people who, are going to dislike it in reaction to that as much as anything else. Though there are things in the movie to dislike, and I will talk a little bit about that. But if you enjoy good action, well paced as far as the action scenes themselves, nice, beautiful set pieces, decent passable effects, and with an interesting amalgamation of both practical and CGI within it. Particularly some things that surprised me that they were going to be practical when I knew that these things were going to be in the movie. It surprised me that they did them with practical effects. But if you like a mix of all that, fast-paced humor, this movie has been called to the compared to the MCU. I think that's both favorable and not true and not true. But if any of those kind of things, if you like Marvel movies, you're going to like this movie. If you like, and the better Marvel movies, you'll like this movie. If you like fantasy, just generically, you'll like this movie. If you like funny comedy, action comedy, you're going to like this movie. It's good for all of those things. If you're looking for a serious, more Lord of the Rings styled fantasy, that's going to give you a little more epic. If you like that, this is probably not the movie for you. Or if it is, just know going into it that it's not that. You're going to be watching something different, which the trailers definitely made that clear. Though the trailers actually played up the humor more than the movie itself does, which moves me from my initial recommendation that you should go watch it if you haven't watched it yet. Even if you don't like D&D, you actually don't have to know anything about D&D. Oh wow, I just reflected the light off my forehead into the camera. But if you even if you don't like D&D at all, or haven't played D&D, you'll know what's going on. There's some stuff it's actually a lot of reference done right, in my opinion. But I'll get to that, like I said, in a more spoiler type situation. But at least for right now, just know you don't have to care, know, or like, or understand D&D at all to enjoy this movie and to get what you need out of it. It's definitely worth that. So here are the positives. I felt like all the characters were written in such a way that you connected with them. Even if some of them were a little more shallow and less developed, they at least gave you something there to latch on. Every single character had something to latch on to, where it is an ensemble cast, it's a fairly large cast, and if this person didn't necessarily hit it for you, this person probably does. And they gave you a nice hook for all of them, something that you could grab onto and care about that person and their story. It is a very D&D story, in as much as like each character has a very personal reason for being involved with it, and all those personal reasons just happen to coalesce into the broader kind of narrative. So it's less like a Lord of the Rings epic fantasy where everybody we're there to destroy the ring and save the world. That is what we're there to do. And this is more like every person has their individual reason why they might want this, be it greed, revenge, justice, whatever that thing is. They have their own thing, and then they all coalesce into the big thing, which is much more how D&D works when you're actually sitting at the table. That's why I said there's the good references. There's the kind of things that as a D&D player you're going to resonate with and realize that's how we do it at my table. But it's not stuff that actually detracts from the story. It's stuff that helps just describe a certain type of story. So that's good stuff, and it's all there. The pacing is super fast, and it moves you quick, both across Faerun as a region, that's where the thing takes place, and Sword Coast specifically, and through plot point to plot point. This movie does not waste its time. It is kind of long, but it feels rushed almost. It's fast, which is where this is both a negative and a positive. And I'm going to kind of throw this out there and let you decide what you want. But this was my feeling. And if this might help you decide whether or not it's worth your time, if this would bother you. The movie, if you have ever seen any movie ever, there is nothing in this movie that should surprise you as far as plot and story. I heard some people who wanted to criticize it call it, quote, paint by numbers. I would disagree with that, because to me that implies lack of effort and lack of care. The story doesn't have lack of effort and lack of care. It's just not an original story. It's very streamlined and very it leans heavily on you knowing how this type of story works, where there's nothing in it that's going to be surprising. In fact, the big emotional twist, you could say, or choice of the movie, without spoilers, you should have seen coming a mile away. But it was like, if it was just lazy that they did it that way, it wouldn't explain why they put so much time and effort into making it meaningful, and where I actually felt, moved by what was happening, even though I knew it was coming. It didn't surprise me, but it did make me feel what it was trying to make me feel. So I wouldn't consider it paint by numbers. I wouldn't consider it lazy. I would just consider it not, for lack of a better word, not original. Like, it's not trying to tell you something that will surprise you. It's just trying to get you very invested in the non-surprising story. This is also kind of like D&D. But anyway, putting that aside. So that's kind of where I'd said, like, I wouldn't take that as a criticism. And on one level, it serves the story well because it is so fast-paced. You don't really have to worry about missing something because there's nothing there for you to miss. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, they use that so that they can get you through a lot of stuff quickly. Compare that on that level, though the tones are completely different, to the first John Wick movie. Did anything in John Wick surprise you? Probably not. But it was, the story was simple so that everything around it could move quickly from where it was to where it needed to be, and to be fast and strong in how it presented that information. That's what Honor Among Thieves did. And that's why I actually liked it really well. My big criticism coming out of the theater, I told this to Renee, who watched it with me. I was like, hey, the movie was super predictable. And that was my big criticism. But as I thought about it, I was like, that's a criticism on one level, but when you evaluate it, it actually made it so I wasn't lost in the movie. Like, it was actually fairly straightforward and good, that it strengthened the story, that I wasn't trying to sift through some kind of Nolan-esque twist and turned tenet plot. It's like, no, this is just and gives you what you want from it. So that's what I would say. Like I said, it has been compared to Marvel movies, and I think that's because it has the same kind of quippy humor in it, and it has a boppy kind of feel, the same way that the good Marvel movies do. But here's what it avoids. It never undercuts its emotional impact with humor, which Marvel movies have started to do frequently. They will undercut, like, something emotionally impactful happens, and we immediately undercut it with a joke. Honor Amongst Thieves does not do that. It moves fast, but it gives the emotional times the weight they need. It gives the humor the time it needs. It will even mesh them, but it doesn't undercut them. That's the important part, as far as I see. And that's where it makes it different. And it's where I would say, if you compared it to the MCU as a whole, it's not an MCU movie. But if you picked it, dropped it into that franchise, it would be a top tier Marvel movie. And I almost hate saying that, because I don't actually think it does this movie a good service to compare it to a Marvel movie. But I can understand why that comparison gets made. And so I just say, on that frame of reference, it's a top tier one. It is definitely a really good, as far as that is concerned. Again, it's not, if you're the kind of person who wants a deep political fantasy movie, kind of like, something either high and epic like Lord of the Rings, or like gritty and political intrigue like Game of Thrones or something, you're definitely not going to be getting that. Um, it's not that. That is not its goal. Its goal is to give you fun. Its goal is to get you from point A to point B quickly so that you can see that fun happen. And it does all of those things exceptionally well. I would recommend this movie for pretty much anybody who likes fantasy. And plus, the better this movie ends up doing, the more likelihood that the type of fantasy movie, or even specifically the type of D&D movie that you want to see get made, gets made. This is definitely on one level a proof of concept movie. You could kind of tell that, I think, from the marketing and just kind of how it presented itself. They are trying to see, studios are trying to see whether or not this kind of thing will actually work with a mass audience, not just a niche D&D crowd or niche tabletop crowd. I would love to see, us get that more serious D&D storyline. Like this is definitely a more comedic, lighthearted one. But if we return to the Sword Coast with new characters, there's talks of a sequel already. If we return and we spend time in Baldur's Gate and like run through Descent, or do Icewind Dale and Ten Towns and give us an actual horror movie from the D&D setting, or go to Ravenloft, something like that. Like all of that stuff is now on the table, but this movie had to work for that stuff to make it to the table, and it did that very well. And I would love to see this movie do well and see those kind of things come. Because as much as I like this movie, I realize there's people who are going to have a slightly different taste on that. Anyway, I think most of the criticism from this is going to be hipsters wanting to be different and wanting to just poop on it, or people who specifically don't like WotC. There's been a lot of that going around. If you have a chip on your shoulder about wizards, that's about the only thing I can see making somebody dislike this movie. Is like, well, wizards, this is not getting another dime from me. It's like, well, I understand that. I, I kind of would like it if I never had to buy another thing from Wizards for the rest of my life either. But there you go. Anyway, hope this review was entertaining, if nothing else, spoiler free. There are some deep themes that I want to talk about that I think actually run very countercultural in their presentation. But I think that would involve delving into some spoiler territory. So we'll leave that for another time. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good day. And hey, go out and see that movie. And go out, buy some dice, play some D&D, live the movie.